Hey Facemakers, welcome back to the factory. For those of you who have been intimidated or a little bit hesitant about attempting some of the things that I've been showing you, they may be beyond your skill level. So let's go back to the basics on how to make a latex mask. When making a latex mask, the first thing to remember is you're working with simple materials. Plastiline or water-based clay, plaster or white hydrocal in the case that I'll be using, and liquid latex, which you can buy in 5-gallon buckets. Now the difference in cost factor is immense. Instead of using the high-tech silicones and other materials and epoxies that I have graduated to using in my work, I think that in the very beginning I used what I could afford and what was available to me. And the first thing I learned to make was a latex mask. So I'm going to start at that starting point to help all of you cosplayers, hobbyists, and wannabe makeup artists to have some place to start where you can achieve something that's A+ in quality at a lower cost to you. Because we all know we're on a budget, and I want everyone to achieve what they want from this channel. I want to share my knowledge with everyone, but I don't want to go over everyone's head. Those things will come along. I'll do some advanced work and you'll see it as you've seen in the past. But let's get going on how do you create something in your kitchen, in your garage, in your room with very little costs, essentially, compared to the modern materials that are used today. First off, let's start with the sculpting plate. This is a laminated wood with like a Formica cover over it. This is basically melamine. You can buy these in sheets at hardware stores. 4x8 sheets, 4x4 sheets, even shelves. You can get a shelf piece that's like maybe 12 inches long, sometimes at 36 inches. You can cut that in half, give yourself a nice piece to work on. This one actually happens to be double-sided, but because it's a laminate base, you can sculpt on it, you can clean it off with solvents, whatever you want to do, and that allows you to reuse it for something else. Now on this, I'm going to sculpt and create a sculpting base to sculpt my mask on. The final product will be made of plaster. The leading up to it can be sculpted from a life mask or a clay pour. Now this is a clay pour of an actor that I did. I'm altering it to be optimal for sculpting a latex mask on. First thing I'm doing is eliminating any strong features like a dimple in the chin. The mouth is slightly open, which is good. I'm also going to deepen the eyes so I can sculpt a mask that has deep set eyes, so you can trim them according to whoever's wearing it. So the edges of that mask really tuck into their eye. So a little makeup around the eye and their mask will look more like a makeup. So let's get started on adapting this mask, this clay pour mask, life cast, into a good sculpting base. Okay, first thing you need to do is figure out your orientation. Now if this was a plaster life cast, you would do pretty much the same thing that I'm doing. This is clay, but this will allow me to position it the way I want so I can continue to enlarge this piece to allow me to sculpt a proper sculpting base. Now you see it's basically flat along the side. The ears are somewhat there. I took the flare off the outside of the ear because I don't need it. And as long as I have this reference in here, that's all I need. I don't need any of this here, so I'll remove that eventually. So I just have a little ear hole. So if I'm sculpting ears, if I have a hard base underneath it and I sculpt an ear over it and I take my mold off, it would break the ear, break the base. So I just want to take this down almost to nothing, so I have the ear hole there to line up with. That way I can sculpt the ears on it and clean that clay out as I go along. So what we're going to do here is find the proper orientation of this on my sculpting plate. So should it be like this? Should it be like this? Well, this is a little short, and I need to elevate this in such a way that it gives me more room behind the ear to sculpt, big pointed ears or whatever I may want to do. So I'm going to put this at a 45-degree angle from point to point. Take a ruler, lay it corner to corner, and just take a pencil and mark your line. You can do a crisscross if you like. This will just help you center everything up so it's exactly in the center of your plate, and you can use the proper amount of space for what you need. So now I can line my head up right in line here. You also want to make sure that the nose is pointing straight up. You know, it may be tilted this way, or it may be tilted that way, but you want to make sure everything is straight up. What I'm going to do to elevate this is I need to tip the whole thing forward so I have more of a continuation to sculpt on, because you don't want to just sculpt from here forward. You want that little bit of a return to hook over the top of your head. So I'm going to tip the mask, keeping my lines straight, and I'm going to put this piece of wood under here in such a way that I can prop it up. There we go. So that way my mask is at a 45-degree angle. You can see how much needs to be filled in. And from here, I will sculpt my corrected sculpting base. Now, I realize that this is maybe more than you want to do. You could probably take a styrofoam head and chop part of it off and lay it on, and maybe sculpt some clay on top of it to create a similar base, and that's great. That's doesn't require a life cast, and you have a lot of control over it. But this method right here is what I prefer to use, because I had the clay pour up. I can sculpt and alter. I can make the nose bigger to accommodate a sculpture that even though it shrinks, it won't be too small for whoever has to wear it. The mouth is slightly open, so if I want to sculpt an open mouth character, I can. You got to realize you're going to be sculpting out from the piece. You're going to make your sculpture much larger than what this piece represents, because you want it to be bigger so it shrinks down and fits you or whoever has to wear it. I want to continue the clay down to here at an angle like that. So that's what I'm going to do. We'll come back to this and I'll show you how I've blocked it out. Okay, well, here's my finished piece. As you see, I've taken away a lot of the human details and just left the basics there, like deep eye sockets and open mouth. I put keys in the eyes and the mouth. And what I'm going to do now is actually make a mold of this final sculpture. I'm taking a pencil and I'm marking about 1/4 inch away from the edge of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my water-based clay and cut a 1/4 inch slab, actually many of them, to go around the entire surface of my final sculpture. The reason for this is so I can duplicate this. Yes, you could make a alginate copy of this and just pour a single one up in plaster. Maybe you could get a couple of them out. But this way I'll have a silicone master mold that will allow me to pretty much make as many of these as I want. I can make them out of plaster, ultracal, a epoxy material. If I use the right kind of mold release, I can actually run another silicone version of this same head. But what I'm doing now is I'm taking some basically utility paper towels and I'm wetting the surface down, because when I make the mold on this, I have to, of course, cover that whole surface in clay, and I don't want to be cleaning the clay off of the original sculpture. So what this paper towel will do is give me a separator to allow me to do that. So as you see, I'm wetting it down, just kind of sticking it into place. It's not difficult to do. It's kind of like doing a layer of paper mache. And what I do is I wet it down, I tear it where there are wrinkles to try to tuck it in to as many of those little tiny fine areas as possible. I simply go all the way around the perimeter of it, all the way down to the surface of the sculpting plate. Then I will finally, once this is completely covered, I will cover it with a layer of either cellophane, or I like to use various materials, whatever is really available to me. There are a lot of materials on the market that you can use, even if you have an inexpensive ground cloth material or plastic to do it. But the material I choose to do on this, because it does stick to itself easily and kind of stays in place rather than handy wrap or saran wrap, is this, you'll see it coming up here. Here we go. This will, in multiple pieces, stick to itself and give me a plastic coating over the paper towel. This also allows me to then put the clay in place. Now, yeah, there are shortcut versions of doing this. Another way would be to take the entire head that's the sculpture that's finished. If I wanted, I could brush multiple layers of latex on it and make a latex mold. But that takes a lot more time, I think, than necessary. But once I get the press and seal on there, I'm going to, I cut a few little darts that need to be so I don't have any open air bubbles in it. So this seals the entire sculpture. And now I'm laying on my 1/4 inch of clay. I very carefully use a clay cutter to get that even thickness. I just lay it right down on the ground, and you can see I have a little perimeter pencil mark drawn about 1/4 inch away from the base, and that allows me to kind of keep a check on the actual thickness. The important thing when you're cutting your clay and building this up is you cut it in little pieces, like a puzzle. You'll cut little triangles, you'll cut little squares, you'll cut little strips. You'll fill it all in. As many of you might have seen before when I did my teeth molds earlier, this is considered a case mold. What this will do is give me an even thickness around the surface of my sculpture, and I will put a few little square keys in place, and then I will take a wall down the middle. I've sprayed the entire surface with crystal clear spray, and now I'm mixing a mixture of white white hydrocal. The purpose of this is just to do a 2-piece mold, so I'm building it up, and this is just the matrix that's going to kind of encapsulate the sculpture, because of course when this is finished, I do one side, then I'll come along, clean up the little clay wall that was there, and we're going to do fast motion here. I block out the other side. Now notice what I did is, as I made my mold, I put a little dram cup in the very top of it and set it there, and I'm working my mold around that cup. When the mold is completed, I will, of course, take it apart, clean it out, put it back together after removing all of the paper and the plastic, and I have that perfect 1/4 inch space inside of that clay, inside of that plaster mold. Notice I've strapped the mold down to the base. That keeps the silicone from leaking underneath the mold and working its way out. After the silicone sets, I pop the mold apart, and you'll see that very carefully, I take my time. Now I've got my 2-piece mold over the silicone. You see my little keys are in place to kind of position the silicone into the mother mold to hold its position. Once all this is all loosened up, I can take the mold, kind of release the silicone from it, and then I will lift the entire thing free, and that gives me my 2-piece mold that is perfect for holding my silicone master mold into place. And look how easy this thing peels off. It just peels off in one clean piece. There we go. And what's great about this is I have my original sculpture completely intact. So if I want to alter it or change it in any way and make a different type of sculpting base, I have that option. So there you go. That's my final silicone piece, and I've saved a lot of time, I've saved a lot of money actually by making it that 1/4 of an inch thickness. And like again, my clay is completely intact and ready to reuse another time. Now what I do is I generally just rub a little Vaseline inside the mold so it allows me to slip that silicone into place once it's closed together. There we go. Now I will put a strap around this to kind of hold it together. Right now I'm just kind of making sure the mold fits into place, locks in there. And the next thing to do is basically clamp this thing together and start prepping it. So I use these mold clamps that just add a nice tightness around the whole perimeter of it. This is called a cradle. I just make it with 2x4s and some spare pieces of wood. And you can flip the mold in any direction you want, and it allows you the ability to hold your mold straight up and down so you can pour your plastic or your plaster into it. Wow, that was a lot of mold making for just a base to sculpt on. But now I can reproduce as many of these as I want. This is my final version. I did it in a combination of 50-50 Ultra Cal 30 and Hydra Cal, white Hydra Cal. It gives me a kind of a hybrid, sturdier version. So I put a handle in the back of it, and now I have this great base to sculpt on. And as you see, I've even got keys put in it around the mouth and the eyes. So if I decide to do a 2-piece silicone mold with the upper mold and the core, I've got keys that can key into the final mold. Otherwise, it's great for making half sculptures for latex masks. The ears do not stick out, as you see. So if you make a mold and sculpt really cool ears on it, as long as you line it up to this area, you'll probably have a perfect area to cut a little hole to hear through if you make really cool ears. And the reason it's that way, so you can pull your mold straight off, do a 1-piece mold, and cast up your latex. So there you go. Hope you got all that. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again on the Facemaker Factory.